In my previous tutorial, I introduced parameter services and demonstrated how to manipulate multiple parameters at once from the command line using parameter services rather than ROS2 param commands, which can only work with one parameter at a time. In this tutorial, I'll answer this question from the Robotics Stack Exchange, giving you an introduction to getting and setting another node's parameters by using a service call in code. All the other parameter services should be straightforward once you know these two, as they are quite similar. Because parameters in ROS2 are associated with individual nodes, it's not possible to work with another node's parameters simply by using the node API. For example, a node calling getParameter can only get its own parameters. Ideally, for this tutorial, you should already have a basic understanding of parameters and be familiar with creating and using services. I'll be using the constructs ROS Development Studio in a ROS2 Humble workspace called ROS2_WS. We'll begin by creating a Python package called Python_parameters. In the same terminal, create a Python node called Python_parameters_node.py. The node simply has two parameters of type string. The parameters are my parameter with value me and description this parameter is mine, your parameter with value you with description this parameter is yours. The node also has a timer callback with a period of 1 second just to log what the current parameters are. Now add an entry point to the setup.py file so that it looks like this. In a terminal, compile the package, then start the node. You should get something like this. So now the goal is to get the parameter values of the node that we just created, Python parameters node.py, from within a new client node that we will create now called getParameters client node.py. So this client node will be a simple asynchronous client. It creates a client with service type getParameters and service name minimal param node getParameters. In order to determine the request message, remember that we can use the ROS2 interface show command in the terminal. And this tells us that we need a list of parameter names to get of type string. So going back into the code, we can see that we use my parameter and your parameter in a list as input to the send request method, which makes the service call. Now add an entry point to the setup.py file so that it looks like this, and compile the package. And run the client node first in one terminal. So right now it's waiting for a service. And now run the service node in another terminal. You should get something like this in the terminal of the client. Since the client was started first, it was initially waiting for the getParameters service, and after the service was started, the client successfully retrieved the parameter values before shutting down. So now make sure that you end all terminal processes before continuing. Now we'll create another simple client node The process here is similar to the previous section, only this time we are setting the parameter values. So we'll create a new Python file called setParametersClients node.py. This node creates a client with service type setParameters and service name minimal param node setParameters. The request message needs to be a list of the parameter type, which has subfields to store the parameter name, data type, and value. Remember that we can use the terminal command ROS2 interface show to determine the request and response fields. The sendRequest method is passed the new parameter values that we wish to set and handles the service call. Now add an entry point to the setup.py file so that it looks like this, and compile the package. Run the service node first, then the client node in another terminal. You should get something like this in the terminal of the client, and this in the terminal of the service node. Just like in my previous tutorial, you managed to set multiple parameters at once, only this time it was from within another node. So this opens up the possibility of scripted interaction with external parameters rather than being restricted to just the command line interface. So now you know how to interact with parameter services in code.